and that was 2011. In 2010, it was 11,500. So they were really willing to negotiate due to the economic downturn, and I want to give the Air District credit. For 2010, it was 11,543, and that's just for the top 9. That isn't all violations. And again, keep in mind what we did. This isn't 100% accurate. We weren't able to dive into the granularity of the negotiation because a lot of that is confidential. It was just these rules violated, total violation amount. Yes, Kathy?
And I don't know if that was in 2010 also, but one of the big 1113 suits that was out there was against Target for selling VOC non-compliant.
Ah,
voting.
that's right. Okay.
So that was a big dollar.
Yes, it was.
Huge number. So I don't know. I mean, just consider that if you could think of that as an outlier.
Oh, absolutely.
Just to,
But if I was the Air District, I'd go ahead and go to Home Depot and Ralph's.
well,
And,
that was in there. I think Home Depot is also
And
on
Lowe's.
the list.
Okay.
Because they can't have each individual user, they can't appeal. That's not their fault, but the people selling it.
it's interesting numbers. Huh? Has anybody ever seen something like this before? I get a kick out of that. Great. Good to know that we're providing something unique today. And then, so that's 2010 and we're in 2011. 2010. And then, what are the things that I want to point out here? Fugitive dust. Now, there was a construction downturn, but they still gave out, through 403 towards the bottom, they still gave out 20 NOVs for construction firms that weren't managing pursuant to their dust control plans. So, and Rule 1470, that really wasn't a focus in 2010. For those of you who have portable engines, or backup engines, I should say, please be careful. So just displaying things a little differently. And putting it all together slide. And if anybody wants these slides, just give me your card, and I'll know that you want me to send it to your FTP. I think it's about 7 megabytes. I'll send it to you. All right, let's move on to another agency. And so we're going from air to water. Again, this is local, statewide, State Water Resources Control Board. They have 9 different regions, whereas the air districts have 30. So the state board has Region 4, that's the LA County area. And then Region 8 is Riverside and Orange County. As you're probably aware, they really don't go by counties or cities. They go by tributary areas for water bodies. And so the total amount, and I want to hand it to the state. They have a fantastic website to get all this data. I didn't do any consulting magic here. I just got on their website, pulled the numbers, and said, Ari, could you make a slide for me? So you can just link and get all sorts of trend data for the state boards. And you can dive into the individual regional boards. But so this is by region. And then, Frank, I promise not to ask you to take any more notes for me. Thank you very much, sir. So you had 59 violations out of 187 that settled. That's about 31%. And so let's see. Aria, what percentage of the time do I click correctly? About 50?
Say that's about right.
So we got Region 8, Region 4. If you want to ask, are any of these, are our regions picking on us? Are they much more aggressive? They're really not. This is about 30% of the population in the state or something like that. And 59 over 187 is 31%. The total fines of 6.1 million over 22.7, about 27%. So it's pretty equally dispersed in our regions. Now let's talk about some of the enforcement action by program. This gets sort of juicy. And there's going to be a lot of changes, I can assure you. But let's just go over some definitions. NPDES, those are just folks that have a point source discharge. They violated their priority pollutants or their metals, and they didn't meet their concentration, so they have to negotiate a settlement. Waste discharge to land, midnight dumping, those are pretty big numbers compared to the amount of violations. So as Terry said, those are a big deal. And I might add, it may not just be the state board, it could also be DTSC and EPA fining for those midnight dumpings. And then stormwater compliance for construction activities, stormwater compliance for industrial activities. Not a lot of violations. Numbers pretty big per violation though. And those are a lot bigger per violation than we saw for the air district. Again, it coincides with Terry's previous presentation that, for water violations, watch out. Let's see, municipal, those are waste treatment facilities, dredge and fill, land disposal, and then all other programs. So, let's talk a brief story about how companies respond to violations. And we have a large client, it's a Fortune 500. They're in the Wilshire district of LA. And there's one thing there that you may be familiar with, the La Brea tar pits. So, huge development. They put in a large retail center, and they needed subterranean parking. Now, there's a huge methane issue there, and the water table's pretty high. So as the water level rises, it brings up the methane. So they have all sorts of alarms within their stores. And however, so they can't have the alarms going off all the time, so they need to dewater. Now, they're dewatering groundwater that has very high concentrations of crude, naturally occurring crude. Nothing you can do, it's going to be there for forever. So for 10 years, they didn't realize they had an NPDES point source discharge permit saying you just can't discharge that water to the storm drain. Well, they were discharging that water to the storm drain, and they exceeded every parameter on their permit. So their general counsel called me. I was quite flattered by the call. And said, Winefield, we've got a problem. Get your Fanny over here. And what do you think the fines could be? And I go over the fine structure, and I said, how long have you been operating? They said, 10.5 years. Goodness. So, we did the numbers. It was in the tens of millions of what their fines could be. And so what we did immediately is we got vac trucks. It was actually a rainy day just like this. We got vac trucks to the site, and we actually hauled. We worked a deal with one of the non-hazardous disposal sites, worked a deal, got to about 12 cents a gallon, a ridiculous low, so we're guaranteeing you a lot of work for the next month or so. And then we got in an interim remediation system. Oh, we also checked with the LA City sanitation districts to see if they take the water. They said, no way, no how, we're not taking storm water. We don't like storm water during rains. It's a mess over here. We don't care what kind of problems you guys are having. So we just vac truck after vac truck. The facility was able to operate. Then we put in a temporary treatment system, very basic system at about 30 gallons a minute. So imagine 30 gallons a minute over 10 years. And then we called in 2 attorneys. One focused on criminal liability. They were trying to protect their corporate officers. And then one who is an environmental specialist. I didn't know Terry at the time, or I would have called him in. And then we went into the water board with some of their enforcement staff to negotiate a settlement. Oh, I can't forget, they had to put it in their quarterly report as a potential liability in the tens of millions of dollars, and it got all the way up to the CEO, and we walked out with a $35,000 fine. I don't know who said their prayers that day, but they worked. And I think in this case, it was just a lesson in responding, just eating crow, humble pie, whatever expression you like, and getting in the treatment system. I also get the feeling that in that area, they weren't the only company that had forgotten they had that criteria. So just a lesson in just being responsive, fessing up, and moving on. They did spend about $1 million, and now they've got an annuity to always clean this water, and they're going to try to get it to the industrial discharge, but that's probably not going to happen. So here's the trends for the past 12 years for the state board. And this is cash liability collected in the green, projects completed, pending resolution, and number of actions. Now they don't just take cash settlements. Sometimes they'll do supplemental environmental projects, or they'll extend the payment out over several years. So this, see, as we get further on, or shall I say to the most recent date, there's a lot of pending that one on the far right. Now, I was just looking at the numbers, 03, 04, 04, 05, said, is that just inflation? So it's not 4% inflation, it's about double. So they have been much more aggressive, the state and the regional boards, And I do remember back when I was on the industry side, if the water board official came to your facility, you really didn't worry about them too much. But now you do, because they tend to find and they're becoming more and more aggressive. So we're going to move on to waste, our third media. I sometimes use the term multimedia environmental compliance, and people think I'm talking about Hollywood or something. No, it's just air, water, and waste. So this is, I didn't want to have a whole bunch of slides here, a whole bunch of graphs, so we just took this straight off the DTSC website. Again, this does not include the CUPAs. I'm sorry, it includes the CUPAs, it does not include EPA. EPA is a whole another menagerie of fines. So number 2, you see that they're at about 4 million, and that was for RCRA waste and non-RCRA waste, we'll split up as such. But they have a lot of interesting data here, which, you know, as Terry's mentioned, some of them are complaints. People just complain about midnight dumping or operations next door to them. And there were a lot of criminal investigations on the DTSC side, many of them triggered by CUPA inspections. And then I find it odd that they only had 1 search warrant and made 1 arrest, but then again, EPA might have taken over. So for fiscal year, again, 11 and 12. Now, yesterday we did some research into this $43 million number. I think they made a mistake. Because if you look back at similar reports, this is an Office of Criminal Investigation. I don't think they got a statewide settlement of $43 million. We're going to put this presentation on our website, and we'll put a little note as to what we found out. We're still researching that, but I think they left off, or they put on that. Again, if you want to see these reports, they're online. Any questions about all these numbers I've thrown your way? Just in general, more or less than you would have thought? It's more than you would have thought? Okay. Anybody else? Less. That was my intuition. I thought they were going to be about twice that, just by some of the activities I've seen out there. I think that's because I sometimes see the worst of the worst. You know, I don't see some of the simpler ones that just get resolved for a couple grand.
You know, Matt, they have instituted new programs this year.
Yes.
The UNB, Go Green, Go Clean.
Okay.
And they're promoting citizen complaints.
Yes. Yeah.
They have 7,000 so far.
7,000?
7,000.
I'm going to look that up too.